Hello and welcome to Beyond the Knife, a medical history podcast brought to you by Surgeons Hall Museums, Library and Archives. We are part of the Royal College of Surgeons of Edinburgh. I am Chanté, Director of Heritage and Estates at the college. Each episode, I'm joined by a guest who shares a story from the history of medicine and surgery. This episode contains discussions on topics that some people may find distressing. Please take care while listening. Today, we're stepping into the world of forensic anthropology, a field where bones speak long after voices are gone. Our guest is Dr. Robert Mann of the University of Hawaii's School of Medicine. Bob is a leading forensic anthropologist, often described as a bone detective, and he spends time here in Edinburgh working with Kat, our human remains conservator, researching the historic skeletal collections held in the museum here. I've been lucky enough to hear some of their findings over coffee breaks, including the stories of the people whose remains form part of this remarkable collection. Today, though, we're exploring a case that began in a homeless encampment in Hawaii, one that shows just how much the human skeleton can record about a life, from healed injuries to traces of disease and daily labor. We'll also talk about Bob's career and how experience, technology, and time shape the stories the human body can tell. So, Bob, welcome to the podcast. We're going to start with our warm-up question that we put to all of our guests, which is, if you could be present for any moment in the history of medicine, what would it be and why?
I thought about this quite a bit, actually, and I had three answers, but I had to cut two of them out because you only want one. As crazy as it is, I mean, I'm really big into anatomy. I'm big into the history of medicine, and it'd be wonderful to walk the streets or be there when Jack the Ripper did his terrible things that he did, to be able to be an investigator. But that wouldn't be it. So for me, I think it would be, when Henry Gray was editing the first Gray's Anatomy, not the TV show, but his book, Gray's Anatomy. And I think it would just be fantastic to sit there and watch him as he removed, Henry Carter, graciously or ungraciously, whatever it was, just to see him do that and to make these corrections to one of the most famous, anatomy textbooks in history. And then kind of ask him, why are you doing that? And why this? And, that kind of stuff. So I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for Henry Gray to edit his own book.
I think that's such a great answer. We actually have done a podcast episode about Gray and Carter as well, and that incredible book. And we have this edition in the archives at Surgeons Hall Museum showing exactly that, Gray crossing out Carter's name. So, Bob, you are a forensic anthropologist, as you just said. What do you do as a forensic anthropologist?
Well, I'm what they call a forensic detective sometimes and a bone detective other times. We look at remains, and I typically say we look at human remains, but we don't just look at human bones and teeth, because animal bones get mixed in with human remains, and sometimes we're dealing with a case where they think this is an individual, a human who was killed or died or whatever, and they recover the remains. So what we have to do is go to the scene sometimes, and forensic anthropologists, we really are the last specialty to be called in to examine remains and help figure out who this person is. Are they human bones or not? How did they die? When did they die? How long they've been dead? And who are they? So we will deal with remains that are typically, they're going to be unidentified remains found anywhere in the world, in the ground, in the water, in a house, under a house, in a crawl space, in an attic. It can be anywhere. And so somebody will find one bone or a complete skeleton.
As a forensic anthropologist, then, you are responding to requests from the police force?
I'm a full-time forensic anthropologist at a medical school here in Hawaii, so the John A. Burns School of Medicine at the University of Hawaii. I teach forensic anthropology, but I specialize, and I also teach in skeletal trauma, bone disease, taphonomy, what happens to the body after death. Most forensic anthropologists are professors in a university. Some of the forensic anthropologists have specialty jobs and titles, but those are a bit less common than the typical forensic anthropologist or archaeologist who, on top of teaching and doing research at a university or a museum or a medical school or a hospital, they are doing cases for police and medical examiners. I'm a teacher. I teach forensic anthropology, but I specialize, and I also teach in skeletal trauma, bone disease, taphonomy, what happens to the body after death, all these different things that you have to be able to combine all of these different elements into the study of the human skeleton to do a complete skeletal analysis. If you can only do the biological profile, and that's what we talk about all the time, biological profile is going to be the big four, as I call it. So age, ancestry, sex, and stature. But then you're also going to be called on to do, how did this person die? What kind of trauma is there? Did they have syphilis? Did they have tuberculosis? Did they have leprosy? Did they have some degenerative disease? And so you have to combine all those talents into one person, although we want to work with as many specialties as we can, and that's a smart thing to do. Work with microbiologists, work with a chemist, work with botanists and entomologists. And I think nowadays, the more tools you have in your toolkit, the more valuable and the more useful you are to the police and the medical examiner. Because if you only know teeth, then typically you're going to have to wait for a case to come forward where somebody says, we need a dental anthropologist. Okay? So I'm a big believer in kind of this mosaic or eclectic approach. Know as much as you can about as many topics as you can, and then you can speak about more things of the human skeleton. Because if you know disease and the biological profile, if you miss the trauma, you've missed a critical part of the examination. And most of the cases I get called in on, and I get cases from big governmental organizations in the U.S., and I've worked FBI cases and police cases, and medical examiner cases. I've trained police at the New York State Police Academy in Albany, New York. I've had specialized training at the FBI Academy, trained police in South Africa. The thing that I get called in on mostly is trauma. And so I get them from Italy, I get them from Thailand, a lot of cases from Thailand, from the mainland U.S., Germany,
Wow. So, Bob, you're joining us today to talk about a very specific case, which is a really remarkable one that you worked on. Can you set the scene for us? How did it all start?
Well, I was probably sitting here in the bone lab that you see behind me, and we've got probably the newest known identity skeletal lab, maybe in the world. And it's here in Hawaii on the island of Oahu. And so now we have about 350 known identity skulls. They're all will body donors. So they donate their body to science, and to science here in Hawaii is going to come to the medical school. We have about 50 complete skeletons. I would be sitting here doing research on these skeletons, and I'm sure I got a phone call or an email from the medical examiner saying, Bob, we've got a skeleton from, I think this was a homeless individual. There are these houseless and homeless encampments in Hawaii. People are out there, they're living in tents or whatever their facility is, it's their home. And if they die, they may not be discovered. Their body may not be discovered for weeks or months. So anyway, we're called in to do a lot of these different cases. I'm sure I was sitting here, I got the call from the medical examiner or an email saying, can you come down and examine these remains? So I would have gone down there, done a typical kind of preliminary exam, and determined, yes, they're human remains, a little bit more about maybe the sex and the ancestry of the individual. I would have brought the skeletal remains and everything that was found with them here to the lab at JABSOM. So I would have gotten the remains here, and I would have noticed very quickly that, there's a lot of fractures in the skeleton, and there's fractures that are kind of unusual. We see broken ribs in elderly people who fall down. We see broken hips in elderly people who fall down. We see, different fractures from people who fall and they put their arm out to break the fall. So there are typical fractures we'll expect to see in individuals. And this individual happened to have an array of fractures that some were healed, some were still actively healing. So it indicated a series of events. And what would have gone through my mind is what would have happened to this individual, male or female, I wasn't sure at the time, to cause a broken bone, and it would start to heal, and then it would fully heal, and then you break another bone. And the age of the individual didn't suggest that these injuries happen when they're 90 years old, which you might
Right.
expect. So we have a series of broken and healing or healed fractures in the skeleton. And so when I look at the distribution and I start marking on the skeletal chart, there's a healed fracture of the skull and broken nasal bones and broke a hand bone, broken elbow bone, broke a hip, broke a leg, broke a toe. You look at that and you say, well, that's unusual. What was this person doing to break so many bones over a period of probably years. And that's what got me thinking. And I wrote up this case. I did the skeletal analysis. I documented everything. I photographed everything. And when I'm done, I'm looking at what I call the pattern and distribution of broken bones in the skeleton. And so I would have known his age at death approximately, the biological profile, his age at death, his ancestry, his sex, how tall he was, how long ago he may have died based on a lot of variables. And then I would have looked for disease. Did he have tuberculosis, or what, did it hit the bones? No, he did not. Had he been shot? No, he had not been shot. Had he been stabbed? No, there's no indication of that. Although you can be shot 10 times, and if none of the bullets strike the skeleton, you're not going to know the person was shot. If the bullets go through the body and out the back, they may be lost forever. And there's one thing that we always talk about, and it's an important concept for everybody to remember, is the absence of evidence is not the same as evidence of absence. Just because something's not there doesn't mean that it didn't happen. Okay? So that's a really important concept that a lot of times anthropologists and others were not taught that in school. So anyway, one of the things I was looking at in there was the pattern and distribution of broken bones, and I'd never seen that pattern and distribution before. And I've looked at thousands and thousands of skeletons from all over the world, police cases, airplane crashes, explosions, 9/11, and I'd never seen this pattern and distribution of broken bones. So I had to try to think what happened. And until we figure out who the individual is, until they're identified, we may not be able to check what we think is accurate. So if I say, well, person fell off of a building 5 different times, I don't know that until we get the patient history and somebody says, well, this person fell off of a building 5 times, 5 different years. What bad luck that would be for him or her.
So that would account for bones breaking, then healing, then re-breaking, then healing.
That's right.
Okay.
Because one of the things we have to remember in all of this is that it takes between 7 and 10 days to be able to see the first evidence of healing in dry bones. Not in a CT, not in an MRI, not in an X-ray, because you can see a hematoma that's formed, you can see callus formation on X-rays and stuff. But if you take all that away and all the soft tissue away, all you got is bone. You have to look at it very carefully. But my own studies have shown, and these are documented injuries, and when the person died, so we know they broke the bone, 11 days before they died, and they died. And so we'll look at the bone and we'll see little bony growths on there, evidence of healing. And so,
wow. So 7 to 10 days, the bone starts to reheal.
Yeah, and that's the number that I've come up with. I only know of maybe 2 different studies, and both studies I was involved in them, but I didn't come to a conclusion in the first study. And the first study was almost 40 years ago. And it was at the Army Medical Museum that became the National Museum of Health and Medicine in Washington, D.C. at Walter Reed. And we're looking at Civil War soldiers. And during the American Civil War, a soldier would be shot. And then, 6 days later, it was amputated because it got infected. And we could see the evidence of healing and the evidence of infection over a known period of time. And those arms and legs and hands and fingers and stuff and skulls were put into whiskey barrels and pickle barrels and things like that. And they were shipped back to the museum in Washington, D.C. So they have this large collection. I was part of the team that we were documenting trauma and healing and things like that. And what stuck in my mind and what I was seeing was about 7 to 10 days. Another study was done, I think they mentioned 10 to 14 days. And that's perfectly legitimate estimate. We're
within that parameter.
Exactly. So we're looking at different collections. We're looking at different individuals, different healing rates in different people. And there are different rates depending on if you're young or old, if you have chemotherapy or no chemotherapy, or you have a weakened immune system, things like that. So 7 to 10 days, typically you're going to see some form of healing. And that's one of the things we need to look for in the skeleton. But it would be a great study for somebody to do a master's thesis or a doctoral dissertation on that, because we don't have a really diverse study on healing of bones and dry bones, things like that. There's going to be a lot of people out there who are going to be interested in your study if you do a study on that. So
I'm going to bring you back to the skeleton with all of the breaks that have healed, and then fresh breaks, healed breaks.
Yes.
Keep telling us.
Okay, so as I'm looking at the skeleton, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. There are certain activities that result in certain types of fractures. For example, if somebody takes and gets angry and hits a wall or hits somebody in anger, they many times will break one of their, the fifth metacarpal. And it's called a boxer's fracture. And you'll see
Is there
that.
like a knuckle?
Um, kind of, but you hit like this, that stress is going to go through somewhere and it's going to find a weak spot in this bone here. Because when we hit, people hit like this, they may hit like this, but if you hit hard enough and you're at this angle, you see the fifth one right here, it's going to hit the wall. And all that stress
So
and force is going to go through here.
For us who cannot see you, Bob, you are currently making a fist and punching your hand like you're punching a wall.
Yes. So if you take your fist and you punch the wall, you may break the outside, your pinky finger, the bone that's in the palm of your hand. It may break that.
Wow.
And it's going to, if you live, 7 to 10 days, it's going to start to heal. And if it starts to heal, you go to a doctor, they take an x-ray, they're going to say, hey, you got a boxer's fracture. What'd you do? Well, I got angry and I hit a wall. And so we can look at these different fractures in the body that have specific names, and the specific name usually reflects the activity that they did that caused that fracture. And so when you combine these different fractures, you got a fracture in the hand, and you got one in the elbow, and you got one in the knee, you got one in the foot. What are you doing to break these bones? So I did the whole smear and got it all written up, and then I sent it back to the medical examiner, and they came back later and said, oh, well, so do you want me to do the big reveal what this individual was?
Absolutely. Tell us.
Okay, so turns out they were a professional skateboarder, and I'd never examined the remains of a professional skateboarder. But they break a lot of bones, and it's a dangerous activity to do. I'm not a skateboarder, and I've only broken a couple bones in my life, but I wouldn't want to be doing what they're doing and breaking so many bones, and I mean some pretty bad breaks. Anyway, that was something that I had never seen before. But when I follow, one of the people I used to work with, and it was my boss at the government lab, his name is Dr. Tom Holland, and he used to use the analogy all the time of you start pulling on the thread on a sweater, and slowly the sweater starts unraveling, and just keep pulling on that thread and see where it leads. And that's what I was doing. I was pulling on the thread, and it started showing me a pattern of fractures that I had not seen before. I'd seen some of the fractures, but not in that combination. And so that combination of fractures, the types of healing over many years, indicated some activity this person was doing that was unusual, and that we thought we would be able to identify. And we didn't identify it, but they later told us the person was a skateboarder.
And were they able to identify the individual?
They were, yeah. So we got the ancestry right, we got the sex correct, we got the approximate age correct. It was an older individual. And I don't remember what it was that they used but to identify the individual, but very typically they will have x-rays. They'll go back and find x-rays of people who had multiple fractures over years. And if they live in Hawaii, they may go to the big hospital here, Queen's Hospital, and say, we're looking for, we'll say, a female who's missing and, may have sustained a lot of broken bones in the last 10 years. And they may say, well, yeah, we have one person, and they send us the x-rays. We've already got x-rays of the broken bones of the deceased person. We will compare those x-rays with the x-rays taken at the hospital when the person broke the bone and went in and got an x-ray. And we'll see, oh, there's the same fracture. And, oh, look over here. They broke a rib and it healed many years ago. And so you kind of keep pulling on that sweater, and you go back further in time and you realize, okay, well, there's records of this individual that broke this bone. I had a similar case where we get the remains of an individual who had been found out in a wooded area, completely skeletonized. What are you going to be able to tell? The first thing you got to do is you have to tell if remains are human or not. And there's three things that I always tell doctors around the world and police and firefighters and things. If somebody presents you with a bone, there's three questions you have to answer before you go any further. The first one is it bone? Because it could be plastic. If it's bone, is it human bone? If it's human bone, what bone is it? And then take the next steps to do your analysis. I had two cases presented to me over the past 20 years or so by medical examiners, and I'm holding up a pen now to the camera, to the lens, and they hand me this bone. They say, well, what do you think, Bob? And I go, well, it's not bone. They go, well, it's bone. And you go, no, it's not. Well, how do you know? And then I'm holding a pin up again and I'm bending it and it's flexing and it's plastic. So it's a plastic model of a human bone. And think about the terminology. What should you be saying about that? Is it a bone? Well, it's a model, it's a print of a bone, but it's not bone. So if it's not bone, what is it? Then you go on to the next step. So what we're
Mm.
interested in is human remains, typically. Doesn't always have to be human remains. Could be a dog that had been killed or a horse that had been killed. And the police or medical examiner may say, is this a cow bone or is this a skull bone? Well, this is a skull bone. And this is a horse bone. And then they may say, what's this hole in there? You go, well, it looks like a bullet hole. Well, the owner said that this person died of disease and they want the money for the insurance for this natural death. And you go, well, it's not a natural death. There's a bullet hole in the head. So somebody shot this horse, maybe for the insurance.
Wow. I'm telling you what, insurance, man, what a motive for murder, right? For animals and people.
Yeah. And we don't know what the motives are for these different cases out there.
Yeah.
But it really has to stretch our imagination. But there are things that we should be doing that a lot of times we're not doing. And one of those things is answer those first three questions. Is it bone? If it's bone, is it human? If it's human bone, what bone is it? Then go from there.
You've worked with so many different kinds of remains, just even in the short conversation that we've had that you've shared with us already, and in relation to so many different kinds of scenarios, so murder victims, horses, different kinds of people. How has your approach to what you do evolved over time? You touched earlier on this idea of enhancing the specialisms you have so that you can have this whole toolbox of skills. Has that evolved with your own practice?
Yeah, it has. When I started out, if I go back to when I was at William & Mary, so College of William & Mary in Virginia, and I was an undergraduate student, I started getting interested in bones. When you're really young into a field, we think we're pretty good at it. And I remember being a bit arrogant when I was an undergraduate thinking, okay, well, I've got these, it was like 17 or 27 skeletons I was looking at. And one of the most famous forensic anthropologists in the history of the world, Dr. T.L. Stewart, had looked at these remains before I did. And I'm sitting here looking at these things. I had one class in bones, and I'm thinking, I think he's wrong. I can figure this out. I've had a class. It's like, well, I shop at 7-Eleven, so I know how to run 7-Eleven. I don't. So anyway, so I'm looking at these bones and thinking that I'm going to be able to divulge some information. I'm gonna crack the code on these 17 individuals. And they had died 300 or 400 years ago. But again, I had this arrogance and this thought that I've seen it. I know it. Well, 15,000 skeletons later or more, I'm sure it's probably more than that, you realize the range of variation, the range of variability, the things that you will see after you look at 5,000 skeletons that you didn't see after 500. There's no replacing experience. There's no replacing the expertise that comes from experience. There's no replacing working and studying with people who are smarter than you. Dr. Bass used to always tell me, Bob, you want to work with people smarter than you. And I thought, well, I'm kind of smart. I know this stuff. I've had 2 classes now, and I've been doing this, Dr. Bass, for almost 2 years. And then he'd say, well, he's been doing it for 42 years. And you go, it doesn't matter. I know it. And there is an arrogance. It's just all of us have it, I think. But with time, you realize I don't know everything. And with time, you start figuring out the systematic way to do things. And again, the systematic way, we're not taught typically. And I'm trying to think back here before I go to C when I started on A, is that the 3 steps you should do when you're looking at remains is you need to examine, then describe, then interpret.
Mhm.
And I call it EDI, everyday items, to remember that. So you examine something, then you describe it, then you interpret it. And what happens is here's that pen again that I'm holding up to the screen, and you show somebody a pen, they go, well, that's a pen. Okay, well, you got that right, but you really need to examine it. And so you can't examine it on the screen here because you can't see it. But because I say that this is a pen doesn't mean it's a pen. It could be a pencil. And so what we deal with in forensic anthropology is size and shape differences. Everything that we do, and people always say, well, hey, Bob, that's kind of magic. That's cool stuff. You must be brilliant. You must be smart. No. Ask my wife. She knows I ain't brilliant. She knows I'm not that smart. But what it is you become systematic. And so when I started out, the little bit that I knew was the little bit I knew. And I thought that was the whole world. And then with time and experience, you realize I'm getting better at doing what I'm doing. And so I used to know a thimbleful. Now I know one drop more than a thimbleful after 45 years. But you realize your own limitations. And what I did is I started building my own repertoire, my own experience, and my own way of examining things. And I came up with the idea, you got to do those first three things first. Is it bone? Is it human bone? What bone is it? And the other thing was you need to examine, describe, and interpret. Don't describe before you've examined it. Don't interpret it before you have examined and described it, because you're going to step 3 when you should be at step 1. And again, for most of us, and I teach all over the world, we're not taught that.
So you highlight the incredible complexity of what you do, which makes me think about how each of our skeletons can be different and how they record our lives, but in ways that aren't visible when we look at each other right now while we're alive, right?
That's right.
That process is fascinating.
It is. And I tell people, and I've seen it firsthand, that there's no two skeletons in the world that are exactly like. There's no two bones in the world that are exactly like. Every single one of us is unique. Every bone in every body is unique. They're going to look really similar, but let's look deeper. Let's look at it longer. And you're going to go, well, this one's got a foramen over here, and this one bends over to the right, and this one doesn't. This one has an accessory bone. Even identical twins are not identical. And I saw that, and I've seen it many times. I was studying the Fool's Tower in Vienna, Austria, and I hesitate to pronounce the name because I don't speak German. I don't, the Nagenturm, and I know everybody's going to be saying, that's not right, Bob. So anyway, the typical folksy name for it is the Fool's Tower. And I think it's probably the largest collection of pathological remains maybe in the world. And it's in Vienna, Austria. And I'm there looking at bones, and I'm looking at identical twins. They are identical twins. They're joined. They are identical. And I look at the back of the skull, and one of them has a whole bunch of accessory ossicles along the lambdoidal suture, the suture in the back of your head. And they got these little islands of bone there. And I thought, okay, well, let's see if the other one has those 5 islands of bone. I look at the other identical twin. They have no islands of bone. And so it's these little variations that it really reinforces none of us are exactly the same. And again, we may have 214 bones and somebody may have 206, but there are subtle differences to everybody. And there's enough differences in each of us at the gross level and at the microscopic level, the histological level, to be able to distinguish one person from another person. And the thing that boggles my mind, and I think about almost on a daily basis, are we more different on the outsides or are we more different on the insides? And I don't know that I can tell you. Our cells out here, we see identical twins walking down the street. We go, my gosh, you guys, you are the splitting image. Okay, well, you go into the skeleton and you're going to see, no, they're not splitting image. They're very similar, but they're not identical. But that's something that's bugged me.
Their skeleton has changed and evolved in line with their lives, their own biological makeup, their experiences, what they eat,
Everything.
what they've drunk, all that kind of stuff. So we've touched on, skeletons as very much part of what it means to be human. In your work, you obviously deal with cases, or you deal with people that have been through a lot of trauma, right? Murder, unsolved deaths. How do you balance that with the scientific work?
It's interesting because that's one of the questions I really get asked a lot, and I don't think I have the exact answer for it or for everybody, but for me, I remember every single case I ever worked on. Sometimes if I have to go to court and I'm going to have to testify, I have to go back and review the case that, how many bones did I see? How many times was a person shot? Were they stabbed? When were they found? Things like that. But I remember every single case I ever worked on. We see cases and we see bodies in different conditions that we don't think anthropologists are necessarily going to see. And you're seeing things, you see the brutality of some humans, what they do to other humans. So we see a range of terrible things that happen to people, and we see a range of different conditions that people die in and die from. I think I balance it by and I've heard somebody else say this once, and I think it's probably true, is we're able to accept what we have to do is this is a job that we have to do. And we don't take the job lightly. It's not just a job. A lot of the cases that I do them for free. I retired 10 years ago from the United States government. And I don't want to take money for doing a case of a 6-year-old girl who was brutally killed. I don't want that money. So I will file for my fee to do this if I can donate the money back to children of abuse or something like that, whatever it happens to be. And so I get the money in and I just turn the money right back into Department of Anatomy here or to an organization that will help, children in the future not have to go through this kind of stuff.
So you focus on the good that you do, and then you turn it and add to that through philanthropy, really.
I do. I mean, I do my best. Think about, and there are jobs where you have to get paid for working on horrific cases because that's your job and that's what you're paid to do. But my job is to help. Again, I'm at the last link in the identification chain. And when all else fails and you can't figure out who the person is, the anthropologist, forensic anthropologist, is usually called in to deal with one bone or the skeleton of 150 people. And I mean, and the range of cases that I got called in on a case from Italy, and a skull was found in a rock quarry. And then you got to try to figure out who is this person, how they get there, and is it of forensic significance? Were they a homicide victim or did they just fall off of a rock and hit their head and die? That would still be of forensic significance because the person needs to be identified. So anyway, I think what happens for me is we're able to compartmentalize what we have to do, and that if we only focus on the gruesome, disgusting things that some people do to other people, we're not going to be able to do that job, and somebody has to do that job. So we never forget them, but we're able to walk through them and do what we have to do, but they stay with you. You don't do a case and then close the case and go, that's done. Whew, that's out of my mind. It's never going to happen. You're going to remember every single thing about that case.
I think that's amazing. I was talking to a heart surgeon that we work with at the college recently, and he was saying that he remembers the name of every single person who, he couldn't save. Every single operation that he did where the patient didn't survive, he remembers their name. He walks around with this cemetery in his head. But the people he did save, he doesn't remember their names, or, he's less likely to remember their names. It's the people that he lost.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of strange things sometimes that will connect with you. And I know in some groups they call things that are found with remains and with bodies that family members are able to connect with the loved one, and they call them linking mechanisms or linking items. And I heard that term several times when I was working for JPAC, the largest skeletal identification lab in the world. It's here in Hawaii. And I did that at the lab there for 23 years and moved up from the lowest position to the second highest position and supervised all of the anthros and things like that. People don't know what their loved one's remains look like. So when you identify somebody's loved one, and they would come to the lab in Hawaii and look at the skeletons of their loved one, their father, their son, their brother, their sister, their mother, their aunt. They don't recognize those remains because this is not anything they've ever seen. They've never seen their loved one's femurs or skull. But they have seen the coins that they may carry with them. They have seen the watches. They've seen the pen. This red ink pen again that I'm holding up. Somebody would say, my son used to carry a red ink pen. And I remember we had two cases that stick out in my mind. One of them, the family may have been a little bit reluctant to accept, even with DNA, this is their loved one. And then there was there were some melted rubber bands that we took out of the right pocket, the right front pocket or something of a soldier, and it was a pilot. And so and we're showing them to the family and saying, I don't really know the significance of this, and they said, well, that's our son. And you kind of go, why? Why do you say that? And they said, well, because he used to pick up rubber bands. Anywhere he went, he would pick up rubber bands and keep them in his pocket. And that's the thing. The DNA doesn't do it. The dental doesn't do it. Being in the airplane, identifying the airplane doesn't do it. But the 5 coins that they carried in their pocket, and you say, why these 5 coins? And one family said, well, because he used to carry a penny, nickel, dime, quarter, and half dollar. And he always carried his good luck in his pocket. And I mean, that's the thing, those linking mechanisms that link a person to what they're carrying with the person themselves. So
That's
again, the
fantastic.
DNA doesn't always do it.
Yeah, so it's all the other information too. So Bob, if there was one thing you wished everyone could understand about bones, what would it be?
We all have them. I actually came
Mhm.
up with this little phrase, and it's on. I get T-shirts made here locally, and I give them out when I teach around the world, and I do the baseball cap with a skull on it, stuff, and it says forensic anthropology, and underneath it says it's in our bones, and so I should don't put this out to the public. Don't hold on to it. I'm going to go get it, whatever it's called, copyrighted or patented or something. No, but that's what I tell people. It's in our bones. Forensic anthropology is in our bones. And of course, it's in our teeth, but it doesn't sound as good to say it's in our bones and our teeth. So forensic anthropology, it's in our bones. We all share the same characteristics. We all share this this kind of magical skeleton that we keep hidden from everybody else. And at some point in time, if it ever becomes exposed, people can read information into those bones, and they can read the story of our lives as they really are written in bones. And that's a cliche that's, title that's used over and over and over again, that the story in our bones written in bone. But it's absolutely true. The stories are there, and not every story is going to be told. It's not going to tell when you went to 7-Eleven when you're 17 years old, unless when you went to 7-Eleven 17 years old and you got shot twice in the head. So there's hidden secrets in there. And I also like the thought that our skeletons really are composed of and contain hidden secrets. And that's another chapter that I'm writing in the many chapters that I guess I'm writing.
Oh, Bob, thank you so much. That was absolutely fantastic.
Well, hope you enjoyed it. Hope I said something that was half smart that people will enjoy.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Knife, a medical history podcast brought to you by Surgeons Hall Museums, Library and Archives. To find out more about us, you can visit www.museum.rcsed.ac.uk. You can also follow us on our social media channels. Join us for our episode wherever you get your podcasts.